At 6-1, Gabriela Ruse was not simply losing to Alex Eala, she was running out of answers. Alex's left-handed spin kept pulling the ball into awkward areas. Her returns were coming back early, heavy, and uncomfortable. Every time Ruse tried to build a normal service game, Alex stepped inside the baseline and made the next shot feel rushed. Then came the strangest moment of the match. Ruse questioned the racket. Not the crowd, not the court, not a line call, but the racket. And that is why the moment hit Cincinnati so hard, because a racket inspection in the middle of a WTA match does not feel like a small complaint. It feels like a public question. Is something wrong here? Or is the player across the net simply playing at a level you cannot handle? That was the uncomfortable part. Alex had already taken the first set 6-1. She was already up 3-love in the second. Ruse had been broken twice in that second set, and the energy inside Stadium 3 was starting to turn against her with every game. You could feel the match changing. This was no longer just a rematch. It was no longer just a scoreline. It was starting to look like one player had the answers while the other was searching anywhere for a reason. The match felt so far away. Then Ruse asked officials to inspect Alex's racket. The crowd understood the meaning before anyone had to explain it. It sounded like doubt. It looked like pressure. And for Alex, it created one of those strange moments where the match pauses. But the story gets louder because she did not panic. She did not argue like someone caught off guard. She stayed calm, let the officials handle it, and carried herself like she already knew what the answer would be. That detail matters. A lot of young players would get pulled into the emotion there. They would hear the reaction from the stands, feel the awkwardness of being questioned, and suddenly the match would become harder to breathe inside. Alex did not give Ruse that opening, and to understand why Cincinnati reacted so strongly after the result, you have to go back to what Alex was doing before the complaint ever happened. The first set was not close in the way a scoreboard can sometimes hide drama. Some 6-1 sets still have tension, long deuce games, missed chances, a losing player who still looks dangerous. This one did not feel that way. Ruse had beaten Alex before back in the 2024 US Open qualifying. Alex took the opening set that day, then Ruse came back and won. That kind of loss stays with the player, maybe not loudly, maybe not in interviews, but somewhere in the memory, it sits there. Cincinnati gave Alex a chance to answer, and she answered with pressure. Her left-handed forehand kept pulling Ruse wide, not always with huge winners, but with angles that made recovery awkward. Her spin made the ball arrive in places Ruse did not want to hit from. Her return game did even more damage because Ruse could not use her serve as a safe place. That is usually where a player resets. You step to the line, win a couple of cheaper points, slow the match down, and remind yourself that you still have control. Ruse never got that comfort. Alex kept attacking early enough that Ruse's service games felt exposed. And when a player cannot feel safe on serve, everything tightens. The arm gets a little heavier, the feet arrive a little late, the decisions stop coming from instinct and start coming from stress. That was the real story of the first set, not just 6-1 control. Alex controlled the court, the rhythm, and slowly the mood. The crowd noticed it too. At first it was not wild, it was more like a rising murmur, a louder reaction after a sharp return, more energy after another. Alex held. That feeling when a stadium starts realizing one player is not just having a good stretch, she is taking over. By the time the first set ended, Ruse had a problem bigger than the score. She had to find a way to stop Alex's rhythm before the match disappeared completely. The second set gave her no time. Alex kept moving forward. She did not need to play perfect tennis. That is the thing about dominance people sometimes miss. It is not always highlight winners from every corner. Sometimes it is making the other player feel like there is no comfortable version of the match left. No easy service game, no quiet hold, no clean rhythm, and that is where Ruse's frustration started to show. This was supposed to be a rematch where experience mattered. Ruse had beaten Alex before. She knew the matchup. She knew what it felt like to drag Alex into a longer fight and turn the match around. But this version of Alex was different. The old Alex could start fast and still get pulled back into trouble. This Alex looked steadier, stronger, and much more certain about what she wanted. She did not look like a player hoping the match would go her way. She looked like a player forcing it there. So when the racket check moment arrived, it did not come from nowhere. It came from the slow build of pressure. Point by point, game by game, Ruse was being pushed into a place where the normal answers were not working. And that made the question uncomfortable. Was Ruse really seeing something wrong with the racket? Or was she seeing a player across the net who had changed so much that the old explanation no longer made sense? Because when Alex Eala is breaking serve, controlling the returns, staying calm, and making the court feel smaller for her opponent, the story stops being about one complaint. It becomes about the moment an opponent realizes the match is slipping away and reaches for something, anything to slow it down. And that is exactly where Cincinnati started to turn on Ruse. The wildest part was still coming, because once Alex moved ahead 3-love in the second set, Ruse no longer looked frustrated. She looked trapped. By the time Alex led 3-love in the second set, Ruse was stuck inside a match that would not reset. That is a different kind of pressure. Players lose sets all the time. They sit down, breathe, change a pattern, tell themselves the next set starts from zero. But this did not feel like a new start. The same problems from the first set followed Ruse into the second, only now the scoreboard made them louder. 3-love. 2 breaks down, no easy holds, no clean answer to the ball coming back at her. Ruse still had the experience. She still had the memory of beating Alex in 2024, but none of that was helping her in this moment, because Alex was not giving her the kind of match she wanted. If Ruse served with pace, Alex got on top of the return early. If Ruse tried to build more carefully, Alex used the lefty angle to move her. If Ruse waited for a loose point, Alex did not give enough away. Then there was the spin. Not pretty spin, annoying spin, the kind that keeps arriving slightly wrong. A little higher than expected, a little wider than expected, a little earlier off the bounce than your feet want. That is why some fans online started joking about Alex's strange movement on the ball and calling it the Fuklia serve. It is not an official tennis term. Nobody is putting that into a scouting packet. But fan language sometimes catches the feeling better than clean tennis vocabulary. The point was simple. Ruse could see the ball. She just could not get comfortable with it. And when a player cannot get comfortable, the mind starts checking everything: the strings, the timing, the court, the bounce, the noise, the wind, the legs, the opponent's rhythm, anything that might explain why the match feels wrong. That is when the racket became the center of the story. Ruse looked across the court and asked officials to inspect Alex's racket. Just think about how strange that is in the middle of a match. The crowd is reacting. One player is rolling, the other player is down badly, then everything stops because the opponent wants the racket checked. It is not like asking for a towel. It is not like questioning a line call. It is not even like complaining about crowd noise. A racket check carries a different kind of weight. Even if nobody says the harshest version out loud, the implication is sitting right there on the court. Something about this does not look right. That is why the crowd reacted quickly. People inside Stadium 3 had already watched the shape of the match. They saw Alex take the first set. They saw her push the lead in the second. They saw Ruse struggle to protect her serve and struggle even more against the return. So when the request came, it did not land like a technical concern. It landed like frustration. The stadium did not like it. There were boos, there were whistles. There was that restless sound the crowd makes when it feels someone is trying to change the match through something other than tennis. That does not mean every person in the stands saw it the exact same way. Maybe Ruse really did feel the ball was jumping strangely. Maybe the mix of lefty spin, early returns, and pressure made the racket feel like the only thing left to question. But the timing was brutal. 6-1, 3-love. That score changed everything. If Ruse had asked early in the match, people might have been confused. If she had asked in a tight set, maybe the request would have felt more technical. But asking when Alex was already running away with it made the whole thing look like a confession of pressure, not spoken, shown in timing, in body language, in the simple fact that Ruse's tennis was not giving her answers anymore. And this is where Alex's reaction mattered. She did not explode. She did not turn to the crowd and perform outrage. She did not make the moment bigger than it had to be. She stayed calm. That calm was not boring. It was the strongest thing she could have shown, because the interruption had a chance to pull her out of the match. It could have made her angry, it could have made her rush, it could have made her start thinking about the crowd, the officials, the weirdness of being questioned while she was playing some of her cleanest tennis of the day. Alex let the moment pass through her. For a young player that is not small, her rise already comes with noise. Every match feels heavier now. Every crowd reaction carries more emotion. Every opponent knows they are not just playing a ranking number, they are playing a player with a wave behind her. Still, when her racket was questioned, Alex looked like the one person on court who did not need to prove anything with her face. She let the check happen. Then came the result. Nothing. No violation, no illegal racket, no hidden advantage, nothing wrong with the equipment. And that was the twist. The inspection was supposed to create doubt around Alex, or at least interrupt her rhythm. Instead, it cleared her in public, put the question in front of the crowd, then gave the crowd a clean answer. That is why Cincinnati erupted. The moment flipped. Before the check, Ruse could still look like a player trying to find a way back into the match. After the check came back clean, she looked like a player who had questioned the wrong thing. The racket was fine. The problem was Alex. That line is why the whole match felt different. Ruse was not being beaten by a mystery object. She was not being overwhelmed by something illegal. She was being overwhelmed by a player who was returning better, moving with more belief, and handling the emotional temperature of the court with more control. Once the crowd understood that, the balance shifted even harder. Alex was no longer just the player in front. She was the player who had been challenged, checked, and cleared. That kind of thing changes a stadium. It gives people a reason to cheer with more edge. More edge. Support turns into protection. Every Alex points starts to feel like an answer. For Ruse, that had to be miserable. The point of stopping rhythm is usually to make the leading player uncomfortable. You want a pause, you want the match to cool down, you want the opponent to come back a little less sharp. But this pause did not cool Alex down. It heated the crowd up, and it made Ruse's pressure easier to see. There is also a bigger reason this moment stuck. Alex's rise has been full of matches where the emotion around her grows faster than people expect. Washington changed how fans talked about her. Toronto showed how loud her support could get. Cincinnati was supposed to show whether all of that could travel into another big event and another tricky matchup. Then Ruse gave the match a controversy. Suddenly, the crowd had a clean, emotional trigger. They were not just cheering a player anymore, they were reacting to something they felt was unfair. That is powerful. Maybe too powerful for the player on the other side. Because once a crowd decides a player has been questioned unfairly, every clean winner becomes proof. Every aggressive return becomes a response. Every calm expression from Alex becomes part of the story. That is why the clean inspection did not end the drama. It sharpened it. Ruse had asked the question, the officials had answered it, and the answer did not help Ruse at all. It helped Alex. If you saw that moment and felt the match shift, you were not imagining it. That was the pressure becoming visible. That was Cincinnati realizing the equipment was not the issue, and somehow the ending still found a way to get stranger. The racket was clean, the crowd was already fired up. Then Ruse needed medical treatment, and before the match could settle again, the sky stepped in. The crowd inside Stadium 3 was already restless before the match fell apart. By then, the story had moved past a normal Cincinnati result. Eala had won the first set 6-1. She had raced ahead 3-love in the second. Ruse had asked for the racket to be checked. The racket came back clean, and the sound around the court changed. There was surprise first, because a mid-match racket inspection is not something fans expect to see in a WTA match. Then came the boos, the whistles, that sharp crowd noise that does not come from confusion anymore, but from judgment. A lot of people felt like they knew what they had just watched. Ruse could not handle the ball coming back at her. She could not handle Alex's timing on return. She could not settle against the lefty spin, so she questioned the racket. Online, the reaction became even harsher. Fans did what fans always do when a strange tennis moment gives them a perfect target. They clipped it, joked about it, argued over it, and turned the whole thing into public verdicts. Some called it gamesmanship, some called it frustration. Some saw it as a desperate attempt to slow down a player who was already rolling. Then came the jokes about the spin. The Fuklia serve line moved around online, not as an official phrase, but as a fan-made way to describe what Ruse seemed unable to read. The ball looked strange. The bounce looked uncomfortable. Alex's lefty patterns kept arriving in places Ruse did not want to hit from. But strange is not illegal. Uncomfortable is not illegal. That was the part that made the clean inspection feel so satisfying for Alex's supporters. Officials checked the racket and there was nothing wrong. No violation, no technical issue, nothing hidden in the frame to explain why Ruse was getting pushed around. The answer was simpler. Alex was better on the day. Still, the ending needs some fairness. After the racket controversy, the match did not finish with a clean match point. Ruse had a physical issue. She needed medical attention and had the area around her right ankle or right foot treated. That matters. You do not have to like the racket complaint to pretend the injury was not real. Tennis can be messy that way. A player can look frustrated and hurt at the same time. A moment can feel like gamesmanship and still be followed by a genuine physical problem. Those things can exist together, even when fans want the simple version. Then Cincinnati added one more twist, weather. Shortly after the medical treatment, the match was suspended because of lightning and heavy rain, so the sequence became almost unreal. Alex dominates the first set. Alex goes up 3-love in the second. Ruse questions the racket passes inspection, Ruse gets treatment, lightning stops play. Then during the delay, Ruse cannot continue, retired. That is the official ending. Alex wins 6-1, 3-love retired and moves into the next round. But the official result does not capture why people reacted so strongly. If you only read the score, you might think this was just a shortened match where one player was ahead and the other got injured. Technically, yes, that is the clean version. The real version had more texture. This was revenge. Ruse had beaten Alex before in 2024 US Open qualifying. Alex won the first set that day. Then Ruse came back and took the match. That kind of loss can follow a young player because it does not only say you lost, it says you had the match in your hands and did not finish it. Cincinnati gave Alex a chance to rewrite that memory. She did. Not with a lucky escape, not with a tight finish, not with a result that needed excuses. She came out and made Ruse uncomfortable almost from the beginning. She returned with purpose. She used her left-handed game to pull Ruse out of position. She stayed calm when the match turned strange. And when her racket was questioned, she did not shrink. That may be the biggest detail of the whole story. The old Alex might have carried that interruption with her. The accusation, the crowd, the pause in rhythm, the awkward feeling of being checked in public while leading the match. A lot of players would take that irritation into the next game. This version of Alex looked steadier. That is why the match felt bigger than 6-1, 3-love. It showed a player who is not only dangerous when everything is smooth, she can handle awkward, she can handle noise, she can handle an opponent, trying to change the emotional rhythm of the match. And that matters because the next test is not small. Amanda Anisimova is waiting. A world number 10 opponent brings a different kind of pressure, more power, more name recognition, more expectation. Casual fans know that level, the locker room knows that level, and after Cincinnati, Anisimova will not be looking at Alex like a nice story from the Philippines. She will be looking at her like a real problem. That is what Ruse may have accidentally revealed. The racket check was supposed to ask whether something was wrong with Alex's equipment. Instead, it answered a better question. Why does this player suddenly make opponents so uncomfortable? Because the racket was legal, the spin was legal, the returns were legal, the calm was real, and the pressure Ruse felt was not coming from some hidden advantage. It was coming from Alex. So yes, the score says Alex advanced after Ruse retired. But anyone who watched the match knows the statement had already been made. Alex got her payback, she kept her composure, and when Cincinnati watched the racket check come back clean, the whole story turned in her favor. Now the question moves to Anna Samova. Can she handle the same uncomfortable rhythm? Can she keep the crowd from turning every Alex point into a wave? Can she stay calm if the match starts feeling less like a normal WTA meeting and more like another Alex pressure test? Because after what happened against Ruse, one thing feels clear. The problem was never the racket. It was the player holding it. If you watch that racket check moment, drop your take below. Was it gamesmanship, frustration, or the clearest sign that Alex had already broken the match?